Hello everyone, so welcome to part 26 of Toxin Sequestration Theory. And hopefully you've watched some of the previous videos. As you know, this is my theory for how the body defends itself against toxins. I am trying to ambitiously develop a unified theory of disease where the root cause of disease is oxidative damage due to toxins. And cancer, on the other hand, in my theory, is not a disease. It is actually a protective adaptation where the body stores toxins inside of tumors in order to protect the body's tissues from oxidative damage. And you can think of it as basically a jail cell for toxins. Basically, we're locking up these criminals inside of the jail so that they can't roam freely and cause all kinds of problems. Definitely recommend checking out my interview with Casey Ruff, which was just released in the past week, where we talk about this in detail. So in today's video, I want to make it a little bit relaxed and lighthearted. We're going to talk about hair and nails as detox organs. And they actually fit in quite well into my three-tier hierarchy for TST. Now remember that in TST, we have basically three tiers. We have tier 1, which are the primary detox organs. That's the body's first resort against toxins. Then we have tier 2, which are the mini vaults. So those are the skin tags, the lipomas, the lung nodules, the thyroid nodules, the ovarian cysts, the sebaceous cysts, all the mini vaults, including the stones like gallstones and kidney stones. And then tier 3 are the cancer tumors. Those are the body's most sophisticated, most advanced strategy for locking up toxins. And but let's start today with tier 1. What is tier 1? That is the liver, the kidneys, the fat tissue, because the body stores toxins in fat. And now today we're actually adding two new additions to tier 1, and that is hair growth and nail growth. And I'm going to argue that the growth of hair and nails serves a detox purpose. And, we can debate about whether that's the primary purpose of hair and nails. It's an interesting question. I've debated people about this. I think it might be. I think it actually might be the primary purpose of hair and nails to detox things. But, you might say, well, maybe hair provides some thermal insulation or some, protection against brush, whatever, if you're walking through the forest, and or maybe it's aesthetically pleasing in some way, so it is possible that hair and nails could have other functions. And let me know in the comments what you think the primary function of hair and nails are. But I will say that it is underappreciated that hair and nails detoxify your body, and so that's what we're going to dive into today. And in particular, it's going to be about toxic metals. And so remember, we've talked all about things like mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, aluminum, and excess copper, excess iron. And there's also a bunch of underappreciated toxic metals, things like chromium, manganese, vanadium, antimony. So there's a bunch of other toxic metals. And of course, the reason why we know about all these things is because you do a hair tissue mineral analysis, and that's exactly the kind of things that show up. And that is an underlying message here, which is that I personally have been doing HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis, for my family. And I've been trying to document our detox process on the carnivore diet. And it's been very instructive because we've learned a lot. We didn't realize that we had all these toxic metals in our body. We didn't know that we had uranium and arsenic and mercury and aluminum and manganese, vanadium, etc. But it turns out we do. And so I also want to advocate people to consider getting a hair tissue mineral analysis, because you will learn a lot from that. And you'll especially learn a lot if you do what's called serial analysis, where you do it periodically, basically something like once every 4 months. And then you'll see how the metals get dumped into your hair over time. It's a detox process. So Anyway, it's very instructive. I do recommend HTMA. There's not a lot of things, by the way, that I recommend. Like, I don't recommend pharmaceuticals. I don't recommend chemotherapy or radiation or ivermectin or fenben. It's very rare that I actually give recommendations to people. Most of the time, I'm telling people not to do things. I'm telling people, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Hair tissue mineral analysis is one of the few cases where I actually recommend something. I actually say, you guys should do that. Like, it's actually good. And you can also work together with a professional who works with detox of heavy metals. And there's good people like Garrett Smith, Robert Selig, and some other people that help you detox these toxic metals and track your detox with HTMA. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but I wanted to mention HTMA because it actually provides the experimental evidence for what I'm going to tell you, which is that hair is a detox organ for toxic metals. And the way that we know that is that whenever people cut off pieces of their hair and they send them to a lab and they look inside to see what toxic metals are inside, they see all sorts of toxic metals. So that is the experimental evidence right there. That's all you need to know, that your hair is full of toxic metals. And I'm kind of flipping the script a little bit, because usually in HTMA, what people think is that they think, well, like the hair is just kind of like a window into the toxicity, and that's like the only purpose of it. Like the only purpose is basically just using the hair as like a diagnostic tool. But I'm saying, no, that's not the only purpose. I'm saying that it actually detoxifies your body. I'm saying that the hair is actually a detox organ, and that you can think of your hair as kind of like a conveyor belt where the body basically puts the toxic metals into the hair follicle at the site of growth. And then as the hair grows, those toxic metals get pushed farther and farther away from the body. And it's kind of like putting the metals on a conveyor belt. So, right, as your hair grows, and the beautiful thing about our bodies is that our hair is always growing in the background without us having to think about it, right? It's just always growing every hour of the day. And now we can see, wow, that actually serves a purpose. Like, you mean that as my hair grows, it's actually pushing toxic metals out of my body? That's amazing. And so the body is brilliant, amazing, and strategic. And that is the overall philosophy of TST, my theory, which is that the body knows what it's doing. And like, it is brilliantly designed. And isn't it brilliant that our body grows hair? And we'll talk about how different types of hair detoxify different parts of your body. So in the case of scalp hair, it's going to detoxify your brain. So, and we all know that toxic metals are messing up our brains. It is very well known that heavy metals like mercury and lead and cadmium and arsenic totally screw up people's brains. And it's also very well appreciated nowadays that aluminum does the same thing. Aluminum is a severe neurotoxin, and it's been linked to autism. It's been linked to Alzheimer's. So these metals are horrible for our brains. And our brains don't want the metals in there. They want to get them out. And so sure enough, I believe, and I sort of basically used AI to check the medical literature on this. But basically, scalp hair is detoxifying the brain. So the body can actually push metals out of the brain and into the scalp hair. And that is a key reason for why we have scalp hair in the first place. And someone actually raised the point, which is that no one ever really explained to us why our scalp hair always grows and grows and grows like nonstop. Including people who would just have like really long hair, like Rapunzel or Jesus or whatever, like that they let their hair grow and grow. And you would think that, like, what would be the point of having the hair just constantly growing all the time? You would think the body would be like, okay, I think I have enough hair at this point now that it's like down to my waist or something. But the body just doesn't stop. It just keeps growing that hair. So, and I think we have like a sort of explanation now, like, oh, like now we see why the body just is always growing hair all the time. And so anyway, in the case of scalp hair, it's detoxifying your brain. In the case of armpit hair, it's detoxifying your lymphatic drainage. And of course, we have body hair. I have facial hair, hair on my legs and arms and things like that. And naturally, there's going to be metals in the skin, right? So like we all know that we have heavy metals in the skin. And of course, there's more than one way to get those heavy metals out of the skin. Like sweating is another way as well. But hair growth is also quite good for getting those metals out of the skin. And of course, there's other things like pubic hair may detoxify the reproductive organs. And so we have all these different types of hair, and each one serves a different purpose. So let's get into the actual biochemistry here. This is where things get interesting. So there are two key molecules in hair, and that is melanin and keratin. And both of them bind to toxic metals. They are metal chelators. And melanin is the pigment responsible for dark hair. So if you have dark hair, then you have more melanin in your hair. So they have found just a statistical correlation between how much melanin you have in your hair and how much toxic metals you excrete in your hair. So that is very interesting, and it does highlight a slight advantage that dark-haired people have over light-haired people in the sense that they have sort of an additional detox pathway to get those toxic metals out with melanin. However, if you do have light hair, there is still good news for you, because keratin is also a metal chelator, and keratin is in all hair. Keratin has these thiol groups, which are SH, like sulfur and hydrogen, and those SH groups of keratin are what stick to the toxic metals. That's what the toxic metals stick to. And so even if you have light hair, if you have blonde hair, or even if you have gray hair, then you will still have keratin, and then you will still be able to have this as a detox pathway for you, where you excrete these toxic metals. And so, so it's good news. Like all of us will have toxic metals in your hair, regardless of your hair color. It just so happens that if you have darker hair, you would tend to have a little bit more toxic metals in your hair. And that's what the data show. So, okay, now hopefully this also helps us better understand HTMA. So if you are someone who does hair tissue mineral analysis on a regular basis, for example, and it helps you interpret it in the right way. Because once we understand that hair is a detox organ, then you can look at your HTMA and you can throw a party whenever you see a high level of toxic metals. Because what that means is that those are metals that you manage to excrete. Those are metals that you manage to get out of your brain, right? So if you see a high level of aluminum or mercury or arsenic or something on your HTMA, those are technically speaking metals that you have managed to get out of your body. So that's actually good news. Now, of course, you might say, oh, well, could it indicate some underlying deeper toxicity inside your body? And of course, that's true. Like, obviously, it could be true that this is like tip of the iceberg kind of situation where you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg and then the rest is like inside your body. So, and that is a caveat, of course. But nevertheless, technically speaking, if you see a spike of toxic metals on your HTMA, that's like you should throw a party, because that means those are metals you got out. And it also highlights the fact that like cutting your hair is basically getting those metals off. And you should, of course, get rid of that hair that you cut if you got a haircut, because there's like metals in the hair, right? So it highlights some interesting practical things, which is like, oh, when you get a haircut, you're actually getting rid of toxic metals from your body. It's kind of cool. And of course, we'll get to later nails and how basically like cutting your nails does the same thing. So trimming your nails will actually get rid of toxic metals as well. All right, but I think that basically wraps up this discussion of hair. I just want to point out that, as I said, different types of hair will detoxify different organs in your body. Keratin and melanin are the two key chemicals in the hair that chelate the toxic metals, and it's a long list of toxic metals, by the way, that they chelate. Just in case people are interested, melanin, I produce a table of like what are the metals that melanin binds most strongly to, and the 5 metals that melanin binds most strongly to are mercury, lead, cadmium, and excess iron and excess copper. So those appear to be the 5 toxic metals that melanin binds most strongly to. And then if you go down farther on the list, you'll get things like nickel and aluminum. But naturally, this is why you'll see things like mercury, cadmium, lead, copper, and iron in your hair test. And I should also point out that you might be wondering, why is it that sometimes people get gray hair or they get loss of hair? That's a really interesting question. And people have probably noticed that you might tend to get gray hair or loss of hair during periods of high stress or high toxic exposure. An extreme case would be someone who's actually doing chemotherapy, where chemo is actually one of the most toxic chemicals in the whole world, and then they get massive hair loss. But even if you're just eating basically a high toxin diet, I have a colleague who's in his 20s and he's going bald because he's eating a high toxin diet on a regular basis. And so basically what I'm saying is that I think that these toxins can inhibit the growth of hair, causing the either loss of hair or loss of hair growth. And also it can sort of signal that the body is reverting to more internal sources of detox. So like whenever you're under extreme toxic overload, the body may just decide to focus on things like the liver, the kidneys, the adipose tissue, more sort of internal, more intense detox pathways, and it may just kind of give up on the hair. There's different ways to look at it. Either the body kind of strategically giving up on the hair, or that basically the toxins are actually damaging the hair follicles themselves. But either way, it does seem to be true that when you're under extreme toxic stress, you're exposed to a lot of toxins, then you tend to get either gray hair or loss of hair. But what is interesting is a lot of people don't really know why that's happening, right? They don't make the connection to toxins. So many people will have either graying of their hair or loss of hair, and they'll just think like, oh, it's natural aging. Like, oh, it's just that I had a birthday, I got older this year, and so just because of natural aging, that's why I'm getting gray hair or loss of hair. But that doesn't really make sense from the perspective of, we've seen people who, for example, would get chemotherapy, get tons of gray hair and loss of hair, and then stop the chemotherapy and then go on the carnivore diet, and then all of a sudden their hair comes back beautifully and it's fully colored and there's no gray hair anymore. And so this is fully consistent with the idea that it's toxins. It is toxins that are driving the graying of the hair and the loss of the hair. So, all right, well, that's basically the situation with hair, and now I'm going to move on to nails. And once again, we tend to think of nails as just kind of something aesthetic. Some people paint their nails, right? It's like a beauty thing. But we don't really think of nails as actually detox pathways. But guess what nails are made of? They're made of keratin. And we've just talked about how keratin is a key component of hair, and the thiol groups, those SH groups on the keratin, bind to toxic metals. So in principle, nails should be able to sequester and store those toxic metals because they have keratin in them. And sure enough, that's exactly what we see. And once again, this is experimentally verified. It is common for people to sometimes do nail analysis, where they actually take trimmings of their nails and they send them off to a lab, and the lab does testing to see what toxic metals are in the nails. And guess what they find? They find things like mercury, lead, arsenic, cadmium, aluminum, and then excess iron and excess copper. So all of those have been found in these nail analyses. And interestingly, it looks like mercury is actually the strongest binder to keratin. So out of all the toxic metals, the ones that binds most strongly to keratin is mercury. And in fact, nail levels will, when people analyze them, will often reflect recent mercury exposure. So if you've been exposed to mercury from eating certain fish or eating certain environmental sources, or from dental amalgams, basically fillings in your teeth, then this can show up in your nails. And then also lead and arsenic will both accumulate well in nails, and they're frequently measured in forensic and clinical toxicology. Cadmium and aluminum are also detectable, although they're detectable typically at lower levels than mercury or lead. And then finally, like I said, iron and copper. So those are some of the things that are found in nails. So just think about that, and also think about that if you ever bite your nails, right? If you're someone who chews on your nails or bite your nails, just remember that there are toxic metals in those nails. So you may not want to really bite your nails or chew on your nails. So it's kind of interesting how that habit is probably not a good habit. But conversely, the idea of cutting your nails or trimming your nails, if you just trim your nails every once in a while, then you're getting those toxic metals out, and then you want to obviously discard those nail clippings. So it indicates that trimming your nails is good, biting your nails is bad, but also people can see nail changes, like changes in their nail color or white spots, for example. It's a common finding where people will get white spots on their nails, and it's often linked to either zinc deficiency or periods of heavy metal exposure. Now, it is worth noting that zinc deficiency is relevant to toxic metal exposure because zinc is the metal that you need to detoxify toxic metals, right? So if you do have zinc deficiency, then your body's not good at detoxifying these toxic metals because you need zinc to make this protein called metallothionein, and that is the protein that basically ushers heavy metals around the body for excretion. White spots, like I said, are connected to zinc deficiency or as well heavy metal exposure. There's also these horizontal grooves that are called Bowes lines, and those also can indicate temporary toxic insult or oxidative stress that actually interrupts the nail growth. So those are like horizontal grooves. There's also vertical ridges. So these are things that mainstream medicine just associates with aging, right? So they say, oh, you're just aging, that's why you get these vertical ridges. But in our theory, we're saying that they're actually reflecting like heavy metal burden when you get these vertical ridges. And then also you might get brittle or peeling nails. And that also indicates that you're undergoing a lot of oxidative stress from toxins, especially toxic metals. And you might even get things like dark lines or discoloration, and that also indicates high levels of things like arsenic and mercury. Okay, so those are some of the visible signs that you can actually see on your nails if you have a lot of toxic metal burden. Now, I'm looking at my nails right now. Check out your own nails. I don't see any problems. I'm on a carnivore diet, and I think I've gotten rid of a lot of toxic metals from my body. My nails look great. I don't have any ridges. I don't have any discoloration. I don't have any lines or spots. So I think this bodes well for the carnivore diet because, as I've said before, this is a low toxic metal diet. Carnivore diet is actually the diet that's lowest in toxic metals. And so, sure enough, people do typically see improvement in both their hair and their nails when they go on a carnivore diet. And we can explain that now by saying that there's less toxic metal exposure, and so there's less, damage to your nails. There's less toxins being sequestered in your nails and sequestered in your hair, right? The body doesn't need as much detox there. But okay, you can also get sort of severe graying or white nails if you're under chronic illness. And this we can also explain from the TST perspective. It's very similar to the idea of gray hair or losing your hair. Similarly, you can get gray nails or white nails, and that can indicate really super high levels of heavy metal burden, especially mercury and lead. And these are sort of overwhelming the body's excretion capacity. So that can, explain why some people might get gray nails or white nails. And as I said, you can actually send your nails off for analysis. I've never done it before, but this is similar to hair tissue mineral analysis. Basically, you can send off nail clippings to get lab analysis, and they can check. And it can be an interesting companion to HTMA. It's very non-invasive. It basically reflects your toxic exposure or your toxic excretion over the past 3 to 6 months. Nails grow slightly slower than hair does, And so hair is basically a little bit more recent than nails are. Hair would be probably more like 3 months, whereas nails are like 3 to 6 months. And so in that sense, nails reflect like a longer timeline slightly than hair. Anyway, needless to say, it's non-standard to view nails as detox organs, but that's exactly what we're doing in toxin sequestration theory. And like I said, the key idea is that it's like a conveyor belt where the body puts the toxic metals at the bottom of the nail, and then as the nail grows further and further, those toxic metals get pushed farther and farther up, and eventually they make it to the tip of the nail, and that's when you can clip them off. So hopefully this also makes it clear, once again, that our bodies are brilliant, amazing, and strategic, and they are doing all kinds of good stuff in the background while we're not paying attention. They are pushing toxic metals into the hair and into the nails. And I think this really highlights the beautiful nature of our bodies. And so I'm very excited about viewing hair and nails as detox organs. Like I said, they are tier 1 strategies in my theory, TST. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks everyone for listening.